All right, on today's episode, we interviewed Richard Parker and talked about, he's bought and sold 13 different companies. He's been around the block, made a lot of mistakes. And today he's focused on helping clients avoid those mistakes. And, just a ton of information on this one from going from mistakes made to people he's met to what it looked like to work with Ray Dalio and his family on buying, even larger opportunities. And so, Casey, what were some of your takeaways on this one?
Man, it was a very good podcast for anyone that's looking, but I would definitely say that from a searcher standpoint, if you're sitting there and you're trying to find the business, I mean, he made some very key points, right? 6 months or less.
Yeah, he kind of,
Like
it's a
6
kick
months
in the
or
rear
less.
end.
Yeah.
Hey,
Do
wake
you
up,
need
guys.
to buy a business, or do you want to buy a business? Because you need to want to buy a business. All of those things are there, and he gets into some great tips like how his thesis is made out. What are the key things that when he got into further in his career of buying companies, starting with sales and marketing and going down a list of the things that made him better at what he did, but to have success in the business. And he learned those things. So incredible.
And realize your strengths are what you're going to amplify in the business, right? If you're not a good operator, don't go buy a company that has poor operations. If you're a good sales and marketing guy, find a company that has good operations and you can go amplify the sales and marketing side. And then I think maybe the last thing I'll mention too is, just touched on just kind of relationships, right? And just being good, genuine people. And I mean, I think Richard was the canonical example of that and just, find people that you'd like to work with and grow with them. And so lots of information on this one. Hey everybody, it's Feras and would love to see you at our upcoming M&A Launchpad conference in Chicago, October 26th. At a conference, we talk about what it looks like to value a business, how to buy a business, how do you manage a team, right? And ultimately, we're big believers in the buy then build concept. So we're going to have one of our friends, Walker Dybel, the author of Buy Then Build there, as well as one of our keynotes and many more. So we'd love to see you there to kind of get exposure to the space and network. Hey, Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah, excited to have you.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's always good to, just talk to people that have been there, done it, and really share some of their experiences for our audience. And so, I think, maybe to get going, Richard, maybe give a little people before we start diving into advisory and some of the pitfalls people make, right? Give a little bit of your background and kind of what you did and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Okay, well, hopefully won't bore you too much with all the details. I've been in the world of M&A for 34 years now as buyer, seller, investor, representative for buyers and sellers. I've acquired 14 of my own companies. I've sold 13 of them, and wide range from $50,000 when I first started out to $208 million. So a wide swath of acquisitions. And along the way, not probably about 5-6 years after started in this world, started realizing how much some of the challenges that people were going to have in these businesses, coming across a lot of individuals that wanted to become entrepreneurs. They had no idea where to go or how to start or what have you. And that started me along the road of a journey, putting together materials that would help people buy businesses more from a learning perspective. Here's what you need to know. Here's how to do it. Here's what you need to do. And here's how to do it, because it's a lonely road to buy a business. And if there's, education, in some ways, the internet has made it infinitely more complicated because there's a lot more information out there now, but there's a lot of misleading information or misinformation or disinformation as well. And so, as the years have progressed, it's one universe where it's actually in some cases have gotten much more complicated for people. There's a lot more tools, but there's a lot more people looking. And there's a shortage of, straightforward, practical, real world advice. And so the buy side of things are something that I love to work on and assist people. And I do lower market investment banking work. We're typically representing sellers that are looking to exit their businesses, EBITDA for about $2.5 to $7.5 million. So I cover the whole spectrum. And then in addition to that, parallel to all that, although I've toned it down a little bit, is some of my own acquisitions. I'm just getting a little older and I'm chilling out, enjoying the downtime more.
You mean you don't enjoy all the stress that's involved in running these dang things?
I love the stress. I actually don't find it stressful. I mean, I love the stress of it, but it's time to chill out a little bit, right? So, but yeah, the reality is, Casey, if you don't love the stress, you shouldn't be in this.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
No, that's the thing I tell people. People see the success, but I mean, there's no business that's easy, right? They all have their own challenges, and it can be a painful time, and it can be a smooth time. So, but
absolutely, there's always challenges along the way, and it's never easy. But it's also how you handle it and navigate your way. So you've got to be cut out for it. I mean, it's a lot of it that you can learn. You've got to be ready to. I always tell people one of the most important things is as an entrepreneur, you got to embrace uncertainty. because you never really know what the hell is coming around the corner and stuff happens. And if you get derailed too quickly, you're not going to thrive as an entrepreneur. You really have to embrace a lot of times unknown and just wing it. At times I tell people, I went to bed on Tuesday night, had no clue how I went to bed on Tuesday night, had no clue how I'm going to make payroll on Friday, but you figure it out.
No, the highs are highs and the lows are lows. I mean, that's entrepreneurship in a nutshell. But maybe that's a good segue. So before we talk about maybe tips for clients and some of the mistakes they've made, tell us about some of your biggest mistakes you've made, right? I mean, I'm sure, Richard, you had a few of those. So you want to share just, 13, buys and sells, right? Of those, what are just some of the big mistakes you made going in? And maybe also the flip side, what are some of the big mistakes you think you made kind of on the sell side too?
How long is this show?
You got another 30 minutes to go.
Okay, well, you don't have enough time for all of my mistakes, so I've made some beauties. When I think about things that I've done wrong, as far as let's say the main acquisition is concerned, where, because the minutia of things you've done wrong every day, you recover from that and you repair those things. But I'm talking from not a 30,000 foot view, but maybe 3,000 foot view of where I made some real fundamental mistakes that proved to be really good learning. The first thing is anytime I bought a business that didn't meet my key skill set. I'm a firm believer. I have 5 golden rules. I've been teaching and preaching this to people for years. I have 5 core things that a business must have in place for me to acquire it, which includes, it's got to be sales and marketing driven because that's my best skill set. It's got to have high margins. It's got to have demand in place. It doesn't compete in price because I don't think that's a way to build a business. And I like an element of exclusivity in territory or product. Anytime I've gone away from that, or I've tried. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's taken many years to evolve to that, but it's really, and any time I've gone away from that, in other words, if there's 4, not 5, I've always crapped the bed. It's turned out to be a terrible acquisition. And so the high level ones are always ones where my best skill set or anyone I thought I was going to put in place to operate that business, if their skill set didn't marry perfectly with the business, we always went off the reservation. It went sideways. I mean, I've never been able to get back onto the right path with it ever.
Fair enough.
So that's certainly from the acquisition standpoint. And also I was a very young business owner, 29 years old. My ego and insecurity got in the way early on. I was a young business owner. I was at the table with older people, more successful people than I was, probably felt a little bit intimidated. So it took me quite a while to get past that. And once I got past the ego piece and the insecurity piece and started hiring people that were bigger, better, faster, smarter than me, it's not too hard to be smarter than me. But once I got comfortable with that, my businesses really started to explode. So those were early mistakes.
So maybe peel back the onion a little bit more. You want to give it a specific business, specific example, and kind of what all took place there?
Sure. I mean, there's lots of them. One of the first acquisitions that I made after I started out, I bought this retail merchandising company, and I didn't have a lot of money. I negotiated a really good contract because I really felt that the business, when I say retail merchandising, we'd go in on behalf of suppliers to various retailers across Canada. I grew up in Montreal, been in the States for 28 years now. But we'd go into the retail stores on behalf of manufacturers to make sure their merchandise was properly set up. If they had a national ad breaking, we'd make sure it's at a prominent location, because the people in the stores typically did not bring the merchandise to the store floor properly. And in Canada,
the sales and marketing bucket checked, right? That's sales and marketing. That's your skill set.
That's my skill set. And so I was doing this on a limited basis and believed there was a much bigger pie across the country. And I bought one company. I didn't have much money, and I convinced them to throw in their lot with me so we'd have an Eastern Canadian presence, and then started buying a couple other small companies, rolled them up and built it into a national presence, a real significant company. We had 200 employees, which if you draw the equivalent to the United States, that would be like having 2,000 employees. But one of the biggest mistakes I made was, again, on the personality side is, a couple of my partners, good guys, but as far as bringing in some rock stars, I was just too young, too dumb to recognize that there were people that were infinitely smarter than I was, and of course still am, and should have brought them in to lead the charge. We built that business like from nothing to 4.5 million, which again, if you equate, and this is 30 something years ago, if you equate that to the United States, that's a $40-50 million business, ridiculously profitable, but it could have been 10 times that. And that was a lack of it was definitely on me as far as personalities, top talent. Right now, I mean, anything I get into now, I want the number 1 draft pick.
Yeah.
to be alongside in every area possible, because it makes a huge difference. And again, it was just my own ego, insecurities, learning along the way. Owned a business at 29, and I was I was just trying to keep sometimes one nostril above the water, but learning as I went, and just those two things got in the way. And once I got past those years later and recognized that it's not important to be right, it's more important to get it right or do the right thing. Being right has no value whatsoever. I mean, the universe of profit opened up exponentially.
Good for you for figuring that in your 30s, because I'm in my late 40s, and I'm now partnering with some really great guys, that are, they're strong-willed, strong-minded. They have their own opinions. And I think a younger version of me could not tolerate that, because I had to be right. Even though I felt like I didn't have to be, I did. And when you self-reflect and you think about those things, about having a good partnership, right? Everybody should be bringing those ideas and strengths to the table. So that ego check is a big one.
Yeah. And I think for
It's
those
a big one.
listening, I mean, yeah, you got to set ego aside. But I think the other important note in what you said really is, if you're trying to grow and scale, right? We're not talking about just maintain, but actually growing and scaling. It's about being hyper focused on bringing people on board that have that vision and can do it better than you. Right. And I think too many times people get complacent. The biggest mistakes I've made is, I'm generally a fairly nice guy, and there's people that that linger, right? They kind of know it, but kind of don't. But the problem is it's a drag on the organization. Right. And the biggest mistake I've made is not making changes sooner and not being hyper focused on, do I have, the number one draft pick, or am I getting, a 10th round, right? And is that okay, or is that not okay? And so, there's a lot of these different phrases that really stick, right? Like hire fast, fire faster, right? And just really focus I don't, and that's still even today, I think it's something I don't do a good enough job of, which is be hyper focused on who you have and what their roles and responsibilities, right? That is probably usually the best spend of a good leader or a good manager, because then you get the 10x multiplier from those people, trickling down.
Yeah, and in most cases, the goal is to try to multiply yourself. To me, the phrase that I've always used that resonates with me and thought of is, don't let your loyalties bankrupt your business.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and the reality is, you're doing everybody a favor. Yeah, if you're doing the right thing, if someone is not the right person, besides the benefit for your business to get the right person in place, you're doing them a favor. Because they're never going to grow. They're never going to get to the level that they hope to get to, because you've recognized that they're the wrong person. So you end up, stagnating their growth. So you penalize two things, or three things. You penalize yourself, you penalize your business, you penalize this other person. My mantra always has been, don't let your loyalties bankrupt your business. You don't have to be an ogre. You don't have to be mean about it. You can do things respectfully. When we get to the point to realize, that they're not the right person, chances are, if they're not the right person, you usually can't make them the right person. Very often, that's as good as it's going to get. And if that's not good enough, because good enough is never good enough, you got to make that change. It's painful, but reality is you're doing them a favor.
Yeah. So, you want people to have the three, at least we do EOS, and it's really about people that get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it. Right. So some people want it, some people get it, but some people just don't have the capacity. Right. And so you really need someone that has all three of those things. So
correct.
Yeah. So maybe, so moving on a little bit, right. Just kind of in your career, what's been just kind of the biggest highlight that you hit, and, what kind of got you there? I'm throwing you a little bit of a curveball.
No, that's okay. There's lots of great highlights. I'm very happy. You asked me that, and mostly from, I'd say, highlight some of the relationships and people that I've met along the way, things that I've learned from some of these people. I've had the blessing of being able to work with some ridiculously successful people, multi-billionaires. So some of the learning, I think I would answer that in two parts. The first thing would be the learning from really successful people. And probably the best thing about it, the most successful people that I've met pretty much had one thing in common, which is they rarely focus on the money. They're always focused on building something great. They want to build a great business, and they do that by empowering employees or generating new products or ideas. But they've really not been focused on the money part, because the money, if you're in something that has an economic benefit, if you do it the right way, the money is going to follow by default, right? And so these uber successful people have really taught me that along the way, which is, focus on building a great business and the money will follow. And I think that, probably career highlight, and I've had some wonderful ones. And I don't want to sound like a blowhard, but probably my 4 years working with the Dalio family office was probably the most meaningful time of my business career, separate and apart from things that I started up or grew from nothing to magnificent businesses. That period of time was just some incredible learning, exposure, and access to some wonderful people. My trusted partner and cherished friend, Devon Dalio, who passed away in a car accident a number of years ago. The time and the interaction that we had and the growth that we were able to achieve personally, professionally. I mean, I would probably isolate that as probably the a real highlight to my career. Was just incredible time. The ending was horrific, but the timing was and the learning was wonderful, just unbelievable.
Oh, I was going to say, just for the listeners, the Dalio family office, it's Ray Dalio, right? And we mentioned that in our intro here, but yeah. And that's pretty significant, right?
Yeah. And I think, you told us a little bit about the story, but I mean, it sounds like you were kind of at the peak of your career, right? You weren't just brought in out of nowhere, right? You had done a lot of things, accomplished things. And maybe the thing that you didn't share, maybe I'm curious actually, how did you get connected with Ray? Right? Like what, he reached out to you, or what mechanism did he reach out to you through? And, and again, you were brought in for a specific reason, right? And so you were at the peak of your career. And I think that's why you found it so profound, because, you built up your 30, 40 years of knowledge to get to that point, to be able to then, accomplish what you did.
Wrote a book about it, did a lot of stuff. Maybe did he read your book? How did he find you?
So going back, was probably about 15 years ago. He was looking, his son, Devon, at that point was living in Florida and was looking to acquire a smaller business. This is before they even had their family office established. I think they had like 3 people starting to work at their family office. And Devon was in Florida. He was looking to acquire a business. And through a number of referrals, Ray got to me as being the guy to help prospective business buyers. And Ray's perspective was, I just want someone to mentor and teach him. And so at that point in time, I got a call from someone one day. It said, "Hi, my name is Ray Dalio. You were recommended to me. I'm looking to hire someone that could help mentor my son, teach him how to buy businesses." I had no idea who the guy was. I mean, I don't think like that or whatever. I mean, I had no clue. And it actually just happened at the point where my youngest son was had recently been diagnosed with epilepsy. And I had decided I was going to take 3 months off because I wanted to learn about the condition. And I told this gentleman on the phone, saying, "Look, I appreciate you reaching out to me, but I'm taking a few months off because I want to focus on learning about my son's disease, because I don't know how our family's going to handle this." And so he was completely empathetic. He said, "As a matter of fact," he said, "I have a lot of connections to some great medical and healthcare people." And again, I have no clue who this guy is. He said, "I have some great connections to medical people and healthcare people. So if you want me to make some introductions, or you want to meet any specialists, these can be some of the top people. I'm sure I'm happy to make that connection for you, irrespective if we do work together." And I thought that was such a meaningful offer that I said, at the very least, I owe it to this gentleman to at least meet with his son.
Very cool.
And so I did meet with him, and I thought I thought Devon was great. I mean, he was really inquisitive. He was intellectually curious. I mean, he was really sharp. He was desperate to learn how to acquire businesses. And so I decided to start that I would take the engagement and work for the family. And they hired me. And Devon was learning from my course as the curriculum. And we would meet once a week. And then we started looking at businesses. And after about 6 months, their family office is just starting to be built. And collectively, Ray, myself, Devon, thought it would be a really good idea for him to go work in the family office and really get some good experience.
And how old was Devon at the time?
29,
right.
Which he did which was a good decision at that point. And we'd always stayed in touch. And then Devon actually went on and became the co-CEO of the family office. I mean, today they have 100 plus people. And then in 2017, Devon decided that he wanted to exit the family office and wanted to start acquiring businesses, and went to Ray with this idea. And Ray said, "Hey, why don't you get together with Richard and see if you guys, want to do this together?" And keep in mind, when Devon and I started working together, I had no idea who his family was. I mean, it was only after Devon and I worked. Devon and I had worked together for about 6 months, 7 months. And something that he said, he was the most unassuming, laid back, unentitled man you'd ever met. I mean, he was the smartest, nicest guy I ever met, but he was unentitled.
Wow.
So I had no clue about this family, but something that was mentioned during a conversation triggered me. I said to myself, I think like he might come from some money. And I ended up Googling his dad. And I remember on the right side of Google, I saw like Ray Dalio, like net worth, and was like, holy smokes. But this is long after we had been friends and working together, whatever, because and I don't really care about that stuff. It makes no difference to me. But going fast forward to Devon deciding he was a co-CEO of the family office and decided he wanted to acquire businesses. And Ray suggested that he reach out to me, see if I wanted to do it with him. And I was about to move my M&A practice. This is in 2017. I was going to move my M&A practice, and they called me on a Sunday. We did the deal in like 60 seconds.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to those guys, right?
Well, but it's also the flip side, which is it was very much of what is it going to take to get you to do this? Because it wasn't a case of having to know Devon. I knew Devon, and I worked with, Ray was always very honorable and enjoyed it, but I'll work with Devon. It was like very much, look, we want to do this. Here's what we think the upside is. What is it going to take to get you on board to do this? And I was just about to move my M&A practice. So I was very upfront, very blunt, said, here's exactly what it's going to take. It was okay, good, let's go. And that was it. And we went into business.
So they came to you with a existing business they wanted to buy, and they brought you in to help put it together? Or was it, hey, what is it going to take to get you to help us go find a business for us all to buy?
Yeah, it was very much Devon wants to buy businesses. Ray said he'll finance all of the acquisitions. He wants me to continue to teach and mentor Devon in acquiring businesses, and we'll work together and we can make our investor proposals. But at the top of the heap was this. He wants this to be a learning experience for Devon, and which it was. And we continued our learning and the mentoring. And I learned as much from him as he did from me, because he brought a tremendous amount of benefit from time at the family office in Bridgewater. And so we were completely independent of the family office in Ray. We did our own thing. We had our own offices in Greenwich, Connecticut. We didn't operate out of family office. We wanted our independence, which they allowed us to do. They stood us up. They were our greatest cheerleaders. It was the whole family office.
So for a lot of our listeners, they're starting their search, right? They're starting their search. They're starting with $100,000, $200,000. Maybe they've got to go out and raise that round. And I can imagine if you know that you've got capital, right, and you know how to buy a business, you should be able to identify a business relatively within a reasonable time frame in the search and all that above. So give us kind of that, like, y'all start in 17, and then you've got to go back and start a search process, right? You've got to go back and identify businesses and evaluate. You got to go back to the beginning of your roots, right?
What was the thesis, and then ultimately, what did you guys end up buying?
Well, we wanted to do our version of mini PE. So we wanted to be able to find operating businesses. We had one thing that was really to our benefit, which was this blank slate, and said, guys, learn about a bunch of different things. You don't have to do any of them, but decide, what it is, if any, that you want to do. So we started learning about a lot of different things from franchises, independent operating business, funds, making some parallel PE investments, co-investments, et cetera. So about the whole universe, because it's very much a learning experience for Devon as well at the time. And you allude to these people for $100,000, have $100,000 or $200,000 in the search process. This process should not take long. I mean, I bought my first business with $30,000, which is today's equivalent to about $75,000. And so this process should not take long. You do this the right way. From the time you decide that you want to buy a business until you close a deal should be 6 months maximum. I mean, most people take way too long. They don't make offers. They're spinning their wheels. I mean, you see it more and more and more of all these alleged searchers, they call themselves, which is just a fancy word for business buyer, and they're just spinning their wheels. So for us, going back and looking at identifying businesses was, again, one was a collection of what our golden rules are, what we wanted in a business, which they were modified somewhat compared to my 5 golden rules. We wanted a higher element of recurring revenue, some barriers to entry. We did have the benefit of capital. But that is no different than the individual, no matter what we had related to capital, is no different than the individual who, Casey mentioned 100 or 200 grand, because the process is the exact same. All the steps in the process. The only thing that differs between buying a $200 million business and a $2 million business and a $200,000 business is potentially the financing. That's it, because all the other steps in the process are the same. And very often at the larger businesses, you're dealing with more sophisticated sellers from a buyer's perspective. The books and records are in better shape. They may have processes, procedures in place. And so, the thesis, the process, no one should be taken aback when we talk about some of the acquisitions that I've made, regardless of size, because it's the exact same process. I mean, it really is no different. I mean, I like dealing with ones that are a little bigger now just because of the level of sophistication, but there's no intimidation. The fact is, people just waste their darn time, spin their wheels, and you see a lot of it now with people that are coming out of fancy business schools. I mean, they just think they're real smart, and they may be, but they have a lot of education, but they have zero knowledge. And so you got to get off and realize you got to roll up your sleeves, get your fingernails dirty, because the process, it's a blue collar process, even if you're buying a white collar business.
It's a great quote. It is a blue collar process. There's too many people that get analysis paralysis. They're almost too smart for themselves, right? Because they, everything. I mean, there's risk in anything you take, right? Everything you could be talked out of. And it's really more about kind of understanding what can you talk yourself into that offsets what you talk yourself out of. And it is a blue collar process. It's about picking up the phone, building a rapport. Casey had a quote that I love, which is, we got to go belly to belly with these sellers, right? I mean,
100%.
Spend the time and effort to, it's not just, hey, I sent them an email and I haven't heard back from them in a week and, I'm just going to wait. Like, that doesn't work, right? And that drives me nuts when people act that way and think that way. It's, what else? What are the other 30 things you could do to maybe move this along, right?
Get in the car, get in a plane, do something, but go get in front of them, sit down, most of the people sell, right? A lot of the searchers, again, we're dealing with people that are in the baby boomer generation. They are not accustomed to negotiating over Teams or Zoom or any of those things. In fact, I prefer to just pick up the phone and call because that's the way we used to do it. Or get in a plane and go and meet with them.
We had one recently where the seller said, like, I've talked to 30 or 40 guys and I've only had one group come out and meet me. All right. I mean, be that one.
You know what? So. Yeah. I do this webinar on meeting for and preparing for the seller meeting, and said, understand who you're dealing with. All you smart MBA guys and gals, you're meeting with a guy like me in 60s, successful business. Some have added more tech. Some are more comfortable. Others are not. But understand who you're dealing with. I don't want to sit across the table selling my business with some schmuck who's sitting there on a tablet and writing notes as we talk. I want to look me in the eye, and I want to find out what you're about, what's behind those eyeballs, and then I'll decide whether or not I want to sell you my business. Because if you're the right person, I'll make the deal happen as much as you, the buyer, can make the deal happen. Well, so this idea that this digital world, this digital world is toxic. I mean, it's absolutely toxic. Again, you made the example. I sent emails, they didn't get answered back. I mean, or we'll set up a Zoom call, or I get sometimes with buyers through the course that I sell. They'll send me an example, provide them with some help, and they look at it and I say, this is absolutely this. They send me an Excel spreadsheet with this pivot table and this and that. I said, look, guys, understand something. These are numbers. It's a beautiful pivot table. These numbers are fantastic. These scenarios are all wonderful, but it's actually meaningless because the numbers are the easiest part of the process. The numbers don't lie. You can take care of the numbers when you chop up the process, and there's 23 steps in this. Looking at the numbers and evaluating the numbers should be the fastest part of the process. Because they are or they aren't. I mean, that's it. It's binary. 1 + 1 always equals 2 no matter what. And so, the fancy kids, they remove the human element, and buyers, sellers don't want that.
And sellers don't want it to be just transactional. I mean, the first 2 times you meet with a seller, like, you're not talking the deal 90% of the time. You're talking about the deal 5-10% of the time. And the other 90 is just building rapport, right? Show who you are and building that relationship up. So.
Exactly. What do you go in there prepared to do? You go in there with nothing. Go in there and have a meaningful conversation to get to know each other. You're not buying furniture, but start dating and just get to know. I tell people at the first meeting, you want to know, do I like this person? Can I trust him? Do I like this business? Can I see myself running it? That's it. You answer those 4 questions, you go to step 2.
So then all that said, so what was that business that you guys ended up buying?
Which you're talking with
Dalio.
We made a co-investment in 118 Taco Bells and Applebee's, believe it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, wow. Which was
awesome. And so I guess maybe from
we had
numbers.
Operators. Yeah, we had operators in place, and we liked that business. The multiples were high, but they kept growing. We liked the return. Something like Taco Bell has 4 meals, which we really like. You got breakfast, lunch, supper, and drunks, and so we like that. we like
that is so true.
So it was good. And then after, with COVID, a lot of it, they closed the front of the restaurants, whatever, the takeout and delivery service, has really changed that landscape. So we had that. We made a couple other fund investments that just from a confidentiality standpoint, got to keep, without naming names, but we looked at a number of really interesting businesses and we're very pleased with what we did. Still hold the investment today. And it's done very well. Our investments have done very well.
So everyone's been happy. So really quick, so that 118, Taco Bell's, Applebee's you mentioned. So that was an operator that already had built out those franchises, right? They're, so to speak, an individual that kind of grew up the back office and they're running the 118. So you invested directly into them. Obviously you didn't invest into the franchisor at any point in time. You just bought into the operating company that was running those 118 units, right?
Yeah, we bought in with a PE firm.
Perfect. Oh,
Yeah, it's almost like a recap.
Yeah.
It was a recap, right?
Yeah, we were a co-investor, and it was a really attractive deal. We, we did a lot of work. Our thesis, submit all our key points. Went through the investment committee proposal on our end, which was great exercise, good learning. And one of the things you brought up, I think Casey mentioned it when we talked about individuals. That they have $100,000, $200,000, and then they're going to go to buy a business and look to line up financing or what have you. And one of the things that I'm seeing more and more, and maybe you guys are running across it as well, especially with your podcast and some of the conferences that you do, is the buyers, and I don't mean to keep picking on these so-called searches or whatever, but they're doing this ass backwards. Like, you're going out and finding businesses, putting in LOIs, and then going to find the money, which is completely insane to me. Like, first you got to line up the money. You may not line it up exactly, it may not be in your bank account, but you better get that investor or investors on board and understand what they want to see in a business and understand their criteria, because the world is not waiting for you as someone who has no experience, no track record, no money, to come out and present them with an idea on a business where you think they're going to throw money at you. It's you're smoking crack. You got to line up this stuff beforehand, because if not, you're just never going to get a deal to the finish line.
Yeah.
You've got to have that pace.
Yeah. I know. I mean, the phrase that I like to say, we've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and whenever you actually have the opportunity, that phone call is not about really, raising money. It's actually about closing money. There's a big difference, right? You spent the previous 6 months raising the money, prepping, sharing what you're doing, giving the insight, getting kind of the verbal commit, so to speak. And once the opportunity is there, you're presenting an opportunity, right? And you're kind of closing it. And so it's about, you are doing it absolutely wrong if you're not doing any investor nurturing until you have the opportunity. Because then you put yourself in the bind, right? Where you got to go put up hard money, and can you get it done? Can you not? I mean, that's its own challenge. So.
Absolutely. And it's misleading to people. You're going out to sellers, you tying them up with LOIs and then going to find the money. I mean, at that point, you should be focused on your due diligence, and investigating the business, as opposed to running around looking for money. I mean, it's you penalize yourself by not being able to focus on what's important at that point. After, the work really starts when the LOI is in place. You got to be really scrubbing that business to make sure it's the right acquisition. And you're going to go spend your time looking for money. I mean, it makes no sense.
So, Richard, kind of in a perspective, because we have so many different types of listeners, right? We've got those, like, I've had this question at our conference from a 20-something, like, hey, what do I focus on? How do I do it? I've never done it. Then you get your 30s and your 40s. And you've got all different types of age brackets that are looking to make their acquisitions. Let's talk about the younger group, right? The 20-somethings to 30s that are looking. In your perspective, right? Do you go out and try to buy a bigger business at that age and try to stretch, go raise capital, do all that stuff? Or do you do similar to like what you did? Do you buy a $50,000 or $100,000 business, make that successful, and then know that, over the next, 5-10 years of your life, you're going to have more opportunity to buy more. So if you were to set somebody in their 20-somethings, let's just say they've graduated, they've got their MBA, they're out there ready to search and go to work. And, you and I know you can find all different types of businesses out there. Right. Where would you suggest, with your life experiences today, where should they focus, and what range would you center them on?
I'm a strong proponent that you should buy the biggest business you can. However, with that said, you buy the biggest business that you can, that you're capable of running and you're comfortable leveraging. And so the earlier on in your career, success is not going to happen overnight. You lack, you may have gone to the greatest business school, but if you don't have operational experience, you're going to go out of business. You don't even know what you're good at the beginning. You have no idea what your right skill is. I always say, whatever it is that you do best has to be the single greatest driver, the revenue and profits of any business you consider purchasing, if you're going to be an operator. So if you're a young individual, fresh out of business school, maybe you've held some finance job or whatever, but you haven't had operational experience, just get into an operating business and make sure you don't make a big mistake. So in that case, a smaller business where you could learn. I mean, you don't know anything at this point, and be smart enough to admit to yourself that you know nothing. You've got a long runway. You're 25, 28 years old. You got 30 plus years of runway. Get into it, learn it. Even if it shits the bed, pardon my French, it doesn't really matter, because you can move on to the next one that's bigger that's bigger, that now you've brought some skill set to it. So just get in, learn how to be an entrepreneur, learn what it is to make payroll, learn what it is to hire people, learn what it is to, go out and get customers, learn what it is to sign a lease, to sign a contract. I mean, you have none of that because what you've learned in business school has no relationship to what you're going to do on an everyday scale in business. So a younger person, the goal is get into the game, no matter what. The important thing is get into the entrepreneurship game. And if it's a smaller business, that's fine too. That's perfect. Nothing wrong. I don't even want to say there's nothing wrong with it. There's everything right about that.
But there's two big things you've said. And for anybody that's listening, this is key. One, it should not take you more than 6 months. From the start to the finish of the search. If you're finding yourself doing that, you're not doing enough, whatever the thing is.
You're being too selective.
Yeah,
you're not being enough. You're just finding reasons to say no.
Do that. And two, if you're young and you are getting started, it's okay to buy something smaller, something more manageable, something where you can get those skill sets that you need and learn that process, right? So those are two major things takeaway from today for any of our searchers and listeners that are considering buying a company.
And, when you talk to add on to your point, which we're at the time, the metrics are like this. I've dealt with hundreds of thousands of buyers. So the metrics are like this. You need to look at, it should take you 4 months. You should be able to meet with 40 sellers, make 4 offers, buy 1 business. That's the metric. If you're in this for longer than 4 months, and if you haven't made 4 offers, you're already down the wrong road. 94% of the people who begin the search to buy a business never complete a transaction. So if you've been at this for longer than 4 months, haven't made 4 offers, or at least haven't met with 40 sellers, well, you're on your way to becoming another statistic. So it's time to pivot and look at this. Get knowledgeable. Learn how to navigate your way successfully through the process. Use the right tools. Have the right mentors. But those are the metrics. And if it's 6 months beginning to end, I mean, I guarantee you two guys, I could drop you out a helicopter anywhere in the middle of United States or another country, and in 30 days you'll own a business there.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, it's a hustle. So, I mean, you have to be comfortable hustling, and you're in the wrong business if you're not. I mean, you have to be uncomfortable. I love the phrase of you're not growing if you're not uncomfortable, right? And so if you're just staying within your comfort zone, you're not growing. I mean, you're just kind of maintaining, which is not really kind of what this business is made out to be. So
not at all. Correct. I mean, you got to be out. You got to be meeting sellers. You got to be making offers. It's a 6-month process. There's no reason it should go longer.
And I think that's a good segue. So, I mean, so Richard, obviously very tenured career. You've seen a lot, done a lot, made the mistakes, had the successes. You're focused today on advising people, right? And, and maybe what does that look like? Is it that you're looking for that, what is your ideal person? Is it the 20-something-year-old that's just finished an MBA and looking to go do a search fund? Is it the 35-year-old engineer who's probably had 10 years of work experience that has a little bit saved up looking to go buy their, I mean, who is your kind of ideal client today?
So as I mentioned earlier, I do investment banking where I represent sellers. I handle about 4 or 5 transactions a year, which I really enjoy. I'm very selective. That's on the sell side. On the buy side, we have our courses that we sell. As far as from a consulting or advisory basis, my criteria is very simple. I want anybody who needs to buy a business. I have no interest in dealing with anybody who wants to buy a business. I want someone who has a need to buy a business, to buy a business that for whatever reason, they need to replace or generate an income. They need to, ideally, that they're no longer willing to do what it is that they've been doing every day as part of their career. And they look at this and say, I need to buy a business. And I don't care how much money they have or they don't have, what their experience is or what have you. I love to help those people who have this burning desire and a need versus a want to acquire a company and get into the world of entrepreneurship.
Awesome. And I mean, I think that's where your course is aptly named, How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price, right? So,
yes.
Sure.
And those listeners can go to richardparker.com, and it sounds like you've got a ton of content, ton of information for.
Yeah, I mean, we have tons of videos, educational videos. I've been on, I think, about 80 podcasts in the last year that I've been asked to guest on. So we post all of those.
This one's your favorite, business,
right? By far.
All right.
Perfect. I love it. Sales and marketing guy.
by far. The content, we have articles, the materials, of course, we sell. You can get yourself lost there, and it's good. I deal in the real world. I don't tell people you can go buy businesses throwing off $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of profits and for no no money down and close a deal in 30 days. I mean, it's just nonsense. Don't go down that road. You got to operate in the real world with practical advice from people that have been there. And so, we've got a lot of great resources. People, if they buy the course, great. If they don't, my financial situation doesn't change one bit. Just want to make it easy for people that could really get lost and immerse themselves, and get access to a lot of really valuable practical information.
Love it.
Awesome. All right. So next up is our rocket round, where we ask the speakers all the same 3 questions. So first question, What do you like to do in your free time?
Hang out with my kids and my wife, of course, and my new grandson.
Ooh, congratulations.
It's not even, when you ask that question, there's not even a close second. I mean, I used to be a big fisherman, but now it's all family.
I got to ask, do you feel like you became 10 years younger once you had a grandson? Because I swear my dad, I remember the second I had my daughter, like all of a sudden he's doing the stuff that would start to frustrate my mom, because he's like picking up the kids and he's had back problems, and all of a sudden he's doing all these things. And I'm just like, what are you doing, man? My dad is way too crazy with my daughters.
You know what I am? I'm walking on sunshine with my little guy. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Yes. 10 years younger for sure. And yes, it's a whole different level. It's great.
Awesome.
And I know we touched on it for a little bit there on the relationship, but hey, so what is your most memorable moment in your business journey?
Wow. I would say, when I think back to the whole universe from entrepreneurship, probably just getting out of the gate and getting into my first business. Because I was working for a company, I was making quite a bit of money. I was 29 years old. I lost $60,000 in the stock market. This was in 1990. And I only had 90 grand to my name, which was quite a bit of money at that point, but I really pissed away 2/3 of it. I didn't have a choice. I had to put myself in a position where I could make more money. I was already overpaid at the company I was working at, so I couldn't just get a better job. And so I didn't, when you don't have a lot of options, it's very easy to make decisions. And so pulling the trigger on, at that point, I started a company, then 3 months after bought one. So that getting into that world was, I'd say I still look back at that as the big moment,
Awesome. Well, it sounded like you needed to buy business. So there's a guy named richardparker.com would help coach people that have that need to go buy that business.
So. I needed one. I had no choice. I was digging
it's those are the things. I mean, there's this concept that I love, and I swear I'm going to write a book on it. But in my mind, it's basically, there's things that happen in life that force you to cross the chasm to get to the next one, right? And it's really, it's almost that forcing function that forces you to think about something differently, whether it's relationships, whether it's, a business or a next set of goals. And those things have to happen to force you to kind of elevate your game to that next level. So
100% agree.
Awesome. So then last question, what's your favorite tool or resource?
Oh, that's an easy one. Live, in-person, face-to-face meetings.
Awesome.
That's key.
I love those too, man, meeting people. And that's why we do these conferences. So Richard, loved this podcast, and we've got to get you at our conference coming up. So it's end of October 26th. We'll send you the information, but
great. Thank you.
We kind of get to meet that face to face.
On the panel, you think you could be a great advisor and all that good stuff. So let's make that happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I know you have a couple of them, and keep me posted with the other ones. I would love to get the stuff and learn more about it, because it sounds, what you guys do, and be able to get 100 plus or 200 prospective buyers there and really educate them. I mean, you're doing, the work of the entrepreneurial gods. It's fantastic. I mean, I really commend you guys for doing it.
We take a lot of the same philosophy you do, right? At the end of the day, we give and we give and we give and we give, we're going to get, right? But giving back is really the key here, because it is very difficult, and finding that community and finding out who's telling you the real things. I think you mentioned it, these no money down conversations. You see so many of them online, and nothing against them. They're marketing, they're getting people into their funnel. But that's just a really, really tough way, I think, to go into some acquisitions. And so getting people around real information, the truth, like, just tell me the truth. It's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be hard.
No, I agree with you 100%.
Yes, you have to bring money. Yes, you have to go raise money. Yes, you need to have reserves and plan for that.
And you could lose your upfront money in your due diligence.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. Yes, you should walk away from the deal if it doesn't make. There's all the things that happen.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Those guys who whatever they want, they could do whatever they want for their marketing. It's just, I know it doesn't work, and you want to, you don't want to buy distressed businesses. You want to buy a good, rock solid business, that could grow with you as the owner. I always talk about this boss theory. I like these bland businesses. I like their operationally sound. I like them to be sustainable and scalable. It's like, I've always called it my boss theory. And so you want to have that in place. these other people that are selling these courses and these mastermind groups and all this nonsense, good for them. I just, if you fall for it, you're a sucker, but it's just not the real world. So hopefully, if you just want good practical advice.
Awesome. Well, hey, Richard, thank you so much.
Yeah,
So much information. Really quick, how can people get a hold of you? Just richardparker.com? Is there a better way?
Yeah, that's the easiest way. There's a contact us page on there. If the people want to speak to me directly, just send in an inquiry and just put Mark on there to please make sure it gets sent to me. So my staff will make sure that I address it. But yeah, go to richardparker.com. A lot of good learning and happy to speak with anybody who could use some help. And I got to tell you guys, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was great. And I love what you guys are doing as well. And it's great to hear about your own success, but you're spreading the word in a good way. So I love it.
Awesome. No, likewise. So, hey, we'll have that in the show notes. So, Richard, thank you very much. We'll call it a wrap.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the M&A Launchpad Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast and would like to support us, please leave us a rating and a review after you listen. I'm Casey Minshew, and I look forward to talking with you next week.